Loop control statements in C language. The objectives of this lecture is for the user or the audience to be able to use the following in C programs. We have the for loops, the while loops, the do while loops, and the nested loops. Loop control statements. You may encounter situations when a block of code needs to be executed several number of times. In general, statements are executed in a function. Is executed first. So statements are executed in a function is executed first and then followed by the second and so on. A loop statement allows us to execute a statement or group of statements multiple times. Here are three types of loop control statements. So we have the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. And this will be discussed on our next slides. The for loop in C. A for loop is a repetition control structure that allows you to efficiently write a loop that needs to execute a specific number of times. The syntax is we have for, then open parenthesis, we have init or the initialization, semicolon, condition, semicolon, increment, close parenthesis, and then we have the open curly brace and close curly brace. Actually, this is optional. If you're going to repeat only a single statement, you can remove this, but I strongly recommend that you always place this one, whether we have one or block of statements inside the loop. The init step is executed first and only once. This step allows you to declare and initialize any loop controlled variables. You are not required to put a statement here as long as a semicolon appears. Next, the condition is evaluated. If it is true, the body of the loop is executed. If it is false, the body of the loop does not execute, and the flow of control jumps to the next statement just after the for loop. After the body of the for loop executes, the flow control jumps back to the increment statement. Excuse me. This statement allows you to update any loop control variables. This statement can be left blank as long as a semicolon appears after the condition. So I'm referring to this statement here. Okay. The condition is now evaluated again. So after the increment, the condition is again evaluated. If it is true, the loop executes and the process repeats itself. So it will execute the body of loop, then the increment, and then the condition again. So after the condition becomes false, the for loop terminates. So to illustrate this again or to explain this again, we're going to have our flow chart. So here's a flow chart. So here's the initialization. So the initialization will be executed first and only once. Then after that, the condition here will be evaluated. If it is true, then the code here or the block of code here will be executed. After executing the block of code, it will execute the increment. So after the increment, it goes back to the condition. If the condition is still true, then again, it will execute the code block. After the code block, increment, and then the condition. So code block, increment, condition until the time that the condition becomes false, and that is where the control now will be transferred to the statement after the for loop. So here's an example. We have integer a for a equals 10. So that's my initialization. A is lesser than 15. And we have a plus plus. This will be my increment and this is the condition. So if a is 10, then this one is true. So again, if it is true, it will execute this statement. So it will display value of a, which is actually 10. So that will be the first output here. And then After executing the statement inside, increment a plus plus. So a becomes 11. Then after increment, condition. So 11 is lesser than 15 is true. So it will execute the body. So this will print 11. After executing this, again, increment. It becomes 12. And so on and so forth until the time that it will print 14. That means a is 14. After executing this, it will go to the increment. So this becomes 15. And 15 is lesser than 15 is false. So it goes out of the loop. So it will only print 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Now we have the while loop in C. A while loop in C programming repeatedly executes a target statement as long as a given condition is true. So the syntax is while and then condition, then open and close curly braces. We have this statement here. So if this one is true, it will execute the statement inside the loop. Statements may be a single statement or a block of statements. The condition may be any expression, and true is any non-zero value. The loop iterates while the condition is true. When the condition becomes false, the program control passes to the line immediately following the loop. So if you've gone back here, this will be executed repeatedly while this condition is true. So if this condition becomes false, it goes out of the loop. So here's the flowchart for this. So it will enter the loop. So we have the condition. It will execute the code block. If it is true, then it goes back to the condition. If it is still true, it will execute the code block, condition. True, code block, condition. Until the time that the condition becomes false, so it goes out of the loop and proceed to the next statement after the while loop. So here's an example. Again, this is the same output with the previous one, but we use a while loop. So int a is equal to 10, while a is lesser than 15. So printf value of a percent the end. So initially a is 10, so it will print 10. Add 1 to a becomes 11. Then it goes back to the condition. 11 is still lesser than 15. It will print 11. Add 1, it becomes 12. So let's fast forward. It prints 14. Okay, and then a plus a becomes 15. It goes back. 15 is no longer lesser than 15. It goes out of the loop. So it started printing with 10 and ends with printing of 14. So we have 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Now we also have the do while loop. The do while loop is similar to a while loop, except that the condition is evaluated at the end of the loop, or it is called a post-test loop. So the syntax is do, then we have the open curly brace, we have the statements, close curly brace, and then while condition. So you notice that the condition is at the end of the loop. So the flowchart for this is, we have here the code block. So you notice that it will not first evaluate the condition. So this means that it will always execute the code block at least once. So in contrast with the while loop. So the while loop, let's say for example, the initial condition is false, then it goes out of the loop automatically. But here it will first execute the code and then it will test for the condition. So if it's true, it goes back to executing the code, condition. Code, condition, code, condition, code, condition, false, it goes out of the loop. So the difference is that the condition is done after executing the code block. So again, I'll repeat. So that means that the code here will be executed at least once. But for the while loop, it is possible that the code inside the loop will not be executed. So here's now a similar program. So to print the numbers 10 to 14. So a is equal to 10, do printf value of a, so this will print 10, add 1, it becomes 11, it's still true. So it will print 11, add 1, it becomes 12, it still is true. So fast forward, it prints 14, add 1, 15, it becomes false, it goes out of the loop. So it started printing with 10 and ends with printing 14. Nested loops. In C programming allows the use of one loop or more loops inside another loop. So note, you can put any type of loop inside any other type of loop. But the syntax I'll be showing here will be showing you the nested loops with the same types of loops. So first we have the nested for loop. So we have for, the condition, semicolon, initialization rather, and then condition, semicolon, increment. So open, and this is the close parenthesis for the loop. So this is our outer loop, and then we have here another loop for initialization, condition, increment. We have here the statements. So this statement is actually inside the inner loop, and then we have all statements here that is outside loop. So what this will do is it will initialize the outer loop, test the condition. If it is true, then it will initialize the condition, initialize the inner loop, the loop control, then condition. If it is true, statement. So this will loop until the time that this becomes false. It goes out, executes the statement, and then goes back to this one. If it is still true, then it will again execute this for loop. So that is how nested loops are executed. So we have also the nested while loops. So the same, we can have a while loop inside another while loop. So again, if this is true, it goes inside. If this is true, it will execute a statement. It becomes false, it goes out. So if we'll test for the outer condition of the condition of the outer loop, if it is true, then again it will test the condition of the inner loop. If it is true, execute until the time it becomes false statement. If it is still true, then test the condition of the inner loop. True, then it executes. So that's how nested loops behave. So for the do while loop, the same, but we have the do. So this is our outer loop. Oh wait. So this is our outer loop, and this is our inner loop. So do, then do, executes the statement repeatedly until the time this becomes false statement. If this is true, it goes back to the inner loop again. Execute, exit, statement, true, again execute the inner loop until the time that the outer loop becomes false. So here's an example of a nested loop. So we have here two variables I and j, both initialized to 0. We have here a loop for I equals 0 and I is lesser than 3i plus plus. So examining this, the outer loop will actually iterate 3 times with the value of I from 0 to 2. Or when it becomes 3, then this becomes false. And here we have here another loop with j is equal to 1 and j is lesser than 6, j plus plus. So examining this will loop, since it is incremented by 1 and 6, this will loop 5 times. Where j is equal to 1 and then adding 1 to j, it becomes 2, 3, 4, 5. So the value of j will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so print \n, that means going to the go to the next line, and this will be done 3 times. So that's why we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 repeated 3 times. So as a summary, so what we have discussed in this video are for loops, which are actually used for loops wherein the iteration is specific, or the number of times the loop will be repeated is fixed. And the do while loop and while loop, which are actually used especially if the number of iterations is not fixed. And the do while loop is a post-test loop. That means the condition is done after the block of code is executed, while the while loop, the condition or the testing of the condition, evaluation of the condition is done first before entering the loop. And we can also have nested loops. Thank you very much for viewing this video.